Hey guys, welcome to Thursday's video. Yesterday we talked about introduction, so it's only fitting that we talk about conclusions for this video. We're also going to talk about transitions. So I had you read a couple of pages here over those two things. We'll mention briefly discussion 14. You guys should be pros at peer editing responses at this time. And then we're going to jump into a couple of good examples of conclusions for the qualitative research paper and then one not so good example. Keep in mind that your qualitative research paper is due by 11:59 p.m. tomorrow on eCampus, and the portal is open for that now. So I provided a couple of instructions for that, just things to keep in mind. I've already talked about them now in several videos, but I want to make sure they are clear for the paper that you submit. And you can find that, again, if we go to coursework, papers, find what paper we're on, the qualitative research paper, of course. And then here is the submission portal. So I just typed up a few notes to kind of help you remember. You need a minimum of 4 sources. You can include those in your introduction and discussion sections. I showed you in the last video a lot of good ways to include that. You need to have at least 4 to 5 findings and some 2 answer findings, like yes or no questions, or just like 2 percentage questions rather than having a pie chart of 2 percentages. Just put that into a bullet point, and I put an example here of what that might look like. So you bullet point it, and it would say, while 89% of participants found that they worked out regularly, 11% of participants marked that they did not work out at all. So that would be a better way to represent the data than taking up the space that a visual takes up. And then again, don't add extra spaces between paragraphs. Use the template formatting. Get your abstract to as close as 200 words as possible. Meet the 10 pages as close as you can so that you will have less work to do later to get that minimum 20 pages per departmental requirements. Okay, so we'll talk more about the final portfolio during week 6, but for now that's stuff to keep in mind for your qualitative research paper. For the discussion, just very quickly to refresh your memories, discussion 14 due today by 6 p.m. I just want you to upload your responses to your peers. So again, 3 to 4 sentences of what they're doing well and thanks for revision. You guys have great peer feedback, so keep up the good work there. All right, so let's take a look at the book, the Jack pages that you had to read for today. I really like the information it has on conclusions, because conclusions I feel like are probably the hardest things to write, and I've seen a lot better introductions than I have conclusions for that very reason. So a couple of things that they should do, and I'm just going to go through this information briefly and then show you some examples. So you need to not re-summarize everything. That's one of the biggest mistakes students make, is they just summarize and they leave it at that. I won't have amnesia from when I started your paper to the end of your paper, so please don't just spout back information at me for any paper whatsoever, but specifically the qualitative research paper. Because this paper is more scientific based, the most that you will get in English 102, you should make a consensus. Your research question by the end of the paper should be addressed. So overall, the data points to X. What are you saying? How is your research important? So that would be this part here. Answer the so what question. Your research is important because of what? What does it inform us of? What does it problematize? What does it warn us against? So a lot of you are doing apocalyptic texts. Our perceptions of apocalyptic texts might contain a warning within them. And this is a silly way to say this, but say goodbye. It's just give the essay a sense of closure, and that can be what your future or further work section does. So like if I were to have more time for this survey, or if I were to do it again, I would include X, Y, and Z in this study, or I would do my survey differently or whatever. So a couple of ways you can frame your conclusion is, and this will be more relevant for the op-ed, but you can ask a question toward the end, that's fine. You can frame the subject matter based on your introduction. You can call someone to action, the audience. You can make a prediction about the future. I think probably the prediction would be the best for this paper, because you are trying to talk about an event in the future or, again, a warning for the future. What does the research or the data indicate about our perceptions of something? All right, so again here, these are the things not to do. So regurgitate your whole list of main points. That's what I just talked about. The trick ending, don't bait and switch toward the end. That is something that horror movies should do, but not your papers. The Miss America, world peace ending, don't need those in the paper. And then the kitchen sink conclusions. This is similar to the first one, like where you just include everything and the kitchen sink. Again, unnecessary. Okay, so that's all for that. The transitions pages, which are here, 39 to 41, they are more just supplemental material. It wouldn't be really helpful for me to go through each one. If you have specific issues with transitions or you want to better your transitions, then you can email me about that specifically. If I have noted in your papers before, work on transitions or work on quote flow or organization, a lot of this has to do with transitional work, and there's a good list of words here to help you with that. And they have some examples of parallelism, etc., choppy sentences. We've talked about that, and I provided a document online about that. You don't have to do the exercises. Those are just kind of a waste of time since we're not in a grammar-based class. But yeah, titling will be our next lesson, so we'll just table this for now. Okay, I'm going to get into some good and bad examples of conclusions. Let's start with the bad example. So here, I'm going to give you guys a second. You go ahead and read this paragraph, and then we'll go over it in just a second. Okay, so hopefully you had time to read it all. This paragraph, and you can tell here that I typed in, I moved the green section here and then I typed in the red. So I wanted this student to basically arrive at that consensus that the beginning of the paper promises. So he doesn't make any definitive conclusions. That means essentially he didn't do all of his research. So I'm challenging him to go back and to make a more definitive conclusion at least, and or at least talk about why, a little bit more about why that definitive conclusion cannot be reached. So that's not really an answer or a good conclusion. In your papers, you should have some sort of overall suggestion, because that's the point of the research. If you imagine you received funding for a project, maybe in your field, and then you do all this research, you spend all of their money, this anonymous committee, and then you come to them with and no information, essentially, like, oh, well, I didn't reach a consensus, nothing, I can't present anything. That's kind of the same thing here, only this is less high stakes. So again, arrive at a consensus, and that should be your conclusion paragraph in your discussion section and before your future works. Don't pay attention to how the student formatted his paper. This is all wrong in terms of using the template. He had to change that, so ignore that, please. All right. For the next paper, this is a good conclusion, and then we're going to look at one more good conclusion, and then we'll be done for the day. So I'm going to read this one very quickly, and you can look at my comments there. And this one is not the best one. We're going to look at the best one last. In conclusion, the overwhelming majority of participants were generally accepting of the field of genetic modification while having a very low conceptual understanding of the area. So I just put, is this problematic? They accept it, but they don't understand and generally fear it. He's talking about genetic modification, as it says here, and the public's perception of that, basically, or mainly through the use of film and media. This trend is somewhat mirrored in the wider world, and in combination with negative fictitious representations, ethical and religious concerns and misunderstanding leans more towards the side of mistrust. Garrett's, and then this was his interviewee, but you guys don't have to worry about that. If you do conduct an interview, always refer to the person by their last name. So it's, even if they are your friend or even your parent, or sibling, child, whatever, refer to them by their last name. Garrett's advice for people is, yes, consider the ethics, but also make informed decisions based on actual scientific papers published by people who know what they are talking about. I agree with him, as science fiction and other types of fictitious works, along with public misinformation, seem to direct attitude away from life-saving scientific advancements. So here it seems a little incomplete. That quote, that corny say goodbye part, is what the book is talking about here. So I just put, you can say a little more here. It's imperative that the public understand that these representations are fictional and even hurting their perception of this field, etc. So this might be the so what, like the perceptions of something as portrayed through media and movies and film are hurting the field itself, because people think that genetic modification is either they don't agree with it or they have misinformed opinions about it. So what he's saying here is kind of consensus, is talking about looking at scholarship and finding actual evidence published by people in the field rather than taking the movie's word for it before forming an opinion. However, we need to understand the dangers of forming an opinion too quickly. We need to understand those dangers here. All right, so the last one is right here, and this is one of the better examples of conclusions from my previous class. Through the survey responses and observations I made, I have come to the conclusion that the world has reached a point where humanity is dependent on technology in an abundance of ways. Not only are humans dependent upon transportation using gasoline to move us safely around this world, we are also dependent upon the convenience of grocery stores and seem to rely on technology to occupy any free time that we may have. The reliance that today's society has upon technology is quite concerning and could be the true downfall of the human race rather than an apocalyptic event itself. So this one, as I mentioned earlier, it serves as a warning. It may not be accurate, it may not be true. Again, that's his scholarship and that's what the data told him through the scholarship, but he does offer some sort of urgency to his research. And we'll look at my comment real quick here. So good discussion overall. He needs to connect it a little bit more closely with the data, and there's a little bit information. For example, paragraph 1 in your discussion section should focus on summarizing and then explaining and then analyzing finding 1. And you guys already know this rule. Do a correlation of 1 to 1, finding 1, and then discussion 1, etc. You should have extra information and an overall point that you arrive at nicely by the end. However, the discussion section needs to communicate more clearly and more consistently with each finding. Let me know if you have any questions about this. It'll be the major edit for the paper in addition to adding 2 more sources. So again, parts of different papers can be really, really good, and other parts still need revision. That's why we do peer editing. That's why we do drafts. That's why we do revision, etc. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today. Just focus on those conclusions, focus on getting your drafts done, and keep in mind that this will be the paper that you probably will revise the most, not only because it's the longest, but because it has the most moving pieces. So expect a lot of feedback from me in terms of revision. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow.